everybody.
Hello, everybody. Hi.
Welcome. Monique, where are you?
Yeah, I'm here. I've got my Snapchat filter on, just like you.
Fantastic. Great to have you on the show today. That's me in half real. So, welcome to the show today. And a big hello from Hamburg. After months of sunshine, you can see my little tent here, and very dry weather, we finally had some heavy rain tonight. So at least some things are getting back to normal. Umbrellas are not only being used for tear gas defense anymore. Yay. In the past, we had people from around the globe attending our show, so please let me know here where you're right now. Just drop it in the chat. I already saw some people responding to my questions I placed there. If you haven't met me virtually yet, my name is Ina Feistritzer. I'm the chief editor of the Next Conference and our various activities. Producing the show today with my colleague René Deutschmann here in our little studio. With us on the show are my co-hosts, conference curator and moderator Monique van Dusseldorp from Amsterdam, and trend watcher and keynoter David Matten from London. On today's show, we are joined by another fantastic guest, Douglas Rushkoff. Douglas was named one of the world's most influential intellectuals by MIT and is an author of 20 books. He's a prolific podcaster and documentarian. In his work, he studies human autonomy in a digital age. Douglas, great to have you on the show. Where are you right now?
I'm in Hastings-on-Hudson, New York.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today. We talk to you in a bit, but before that, I would like to ask you, the audience, something. Douglas' most recent book is Team Human. We will have a conversation with him about what it means to be on Team Human in these strange times in a sec. But before that, I would like to ask you, what does it mean for you to be on Team Human? And are you really? Have a think and please let me know here in the chat, or if you are watching this on YouTube in the comments. Also, if you have any questions for Douglas throughout the live show, please let me know and I will forward your questions to him. And just one interesting observation I quickly wanted to share with you before I hand over to Monique and David. In preparation for the show today with Douglas, I found an almost historic internet page. It is called Technorealism, a movement brought forward amongst others by Douglas, which back then was had the approach to have a more nuanced and realistic take on the internet and digitalization. There you can find a manifesto starting with the following. Technologies are not neutral. The internet is a revolutionary, but not utopian. Government has an important role to play on the electronic frontier. This was written in 1998. I think it was the year I got my first mobile phone. And I thought it was amazing that all these thoughts were already there back then, 20 years ago. And still you could copy and paste them, especially right now when big tech companies still have not realized or are just about to start to realize the scope of their actions. More on this in our news of the week. So let me hand over to David and Monique to hear our regular roundup of this week's news from the world of digital innovation and business. Monique, David, what have you got for us?
Oh, well, what did we bring today? I actually am completely obsessed by online events and video communication. So I decided this week I'm going to bring you one topic, and that's what's happening with video. Now, right now, the whole world is obsessed with Zoom or any other of the video tools, and they are used everywhere. I mean, video walls are the way that this year is putting humanity together in a way. Now, the first example that I would like to show it comes from Denmark, where the football club AGF invited their fans to be present at their first game since the lockdown via video because they couldn't come to the stage. So they have this huge video wall and everybody's calling in and waving and cheering for the goals and so forth. And another example this week in the Netherlands, we had one of the Black Lives Matter protests, there was a small square, they couldn't fit in more people, so they put up a huge video wall so more people could join the protest. So video is doing something, and people are now using video to play games and visit relatives and do Trivial Pursuit or cook together. So video. I think we need a new language when we use this video, a new sign language. I mean, at the bare minimum, we need a clear, universal, sign for unmute, unmute. So that would be a good start. But and lots of people are thinking about this. There's the guy called Daniel Glazer, neuroscientist and writer. He speaks a lot for audiences, and he tries to involve his audience by saying, "Okay, wave your hands. So do wave fast for yes and slow for no. So you have a visual impression of what your audience wants." And another example that I saw this week, it was really interesting. This ThinkScon is a network of makers. They got together for a day. So first of all, they got together in video, had their own video rooms, met throughout the day, helped each other with projects. But what they try to do is come up with interesting projects that connect things to video calls, adding an extra layer of communication to the Zoom panopticon. So like being able to give a simple poke under the table to somebody in the call, connecting to somebody on another way. Or one project was put a colored light on, so you can see the light on somebody's face, red, blue, yellow, that responds to their opinion about something. So other ways of using video. I brought two other examples and then I'll shut up. The first one, maybe some people have seen. This was Matt Reed. This is the next example to show. Well, this is a fun one. He made an AI-driven stand-in of himself for Zoom calls. And he actually responds. He has some set response. Super fun, but also a way to see what's coming next. And another fun one that I also think is interesting in more ways than one comes from Media Monks. This is another example that we can show actually. They made a game, and basically the game is you combine video calls with some object recognition, and the game logo goes like this. So the game says, okay, carrot, and then you have to go find a carrot in your house, and the first one that shows the carrot on screen is automatically connected, and then you get a point. So they played around with this only with their own staff, but they've now put it public as well. So go to taskbit.net, invite your friends, and you can play. I mean, I love this idea. And I think right now, big tech is, of course, laser focused on video communications, especially as the big five sort of completely missed the whole Zoom opportunity. And so they're innovating there now as well. And their innovations are a little bit smaller. Google this week can suppress sounds other than voice. Microsoft, you can blur a background. But I think we have a lot more coming that way. And I mean, I'm turning over to David because, as you might have noticed, my Snapchat filters didn't work on my computer. But those filters, apart from, I could be more beautiful, but the filters could also respond to my mood. They could provide more information to whoever I'm talking to. I mean, the face recognition software is getting so good. They know things. David, over to you. What do you think? What is your news of the week there?
Thank you, Monique. I love this idea of an AI avatar for all my work calls. I think I'm going to invest in that. But then my question is, what happens if someone uses this poke under the table function? What does my AI avatar do to that? But yes, look, we're all, as you said, we're all broadcasting our faces relentlessly over Zoom and everywhere else. The story I want to talk about this week, or one of the two, is IBM saying they are no longer going to work on or invest in or research or produce any facial recognition technology or software. They feel so strongly about this, in fact, that they've written to the US Congress saying there needs to be a serious national conversation about the use of facial recognition software by police, the use of it in surveillance contexts. It's pretty interesting when you get to a place where technology companies themselves are advocating for this kind of conversation and this kind of regulation. And then, of course, we saw just yesterday that Amazon are now saying they are going to put a hiatus, a pause on allowing police to use their facial recognition technology in their work. So I think this is a very complex conversation. IBM are definitely right about one thing. There needs to be, and I'm sure there is, ahead a big conversation about the use of facial recognition technology in all kinds of social contexts, from law enforcement, from retailers, in all kinds of surveillance contexts too. We need to think carefully about that world we're entering and what it means for us and how it's going to work and how we want to regulate it. We need to face those. We need to face that discussion. No pun intended. Okay, look, my second big story of the week. Check this out. What you're looking at now is a German startup that's all about the future of transport. They're called Lilium, and their view is that a massive part of the future of urban transport are what you're seeing right now, essentially flying cars. And they've just received a massive vote of confidence because Bailey Gifford, the huge asset manager, which is the second largest shareholder in Tesla, has just invested $35 million in Lilium, so they can realize this incredible future of transport. These are electric vehicles that are designed to carry a few people, kind of short hops within cities, or maybe longer journeys within regions from city to city. So what do you think? A flying car is part of the future of urban transport? It sounds pretty far-fetched. On the other hand, if you've been talking about self-driving cars 10, 12 years ago, you would have said that sounds far-fetched. I think there is a lesson, though, from self-driving cars when it comes to all of this, which is, look, okay, the technology is being perfected. It's certainly not perfect yet. In either case, it's being perfected. But it's regulation and it's city infrastructure that's going to be the bigger challenge here. Like, how do we regulate? How do we organize socially around these new forms of transport? And how do we build the infrastructure they require? So what do you think of that, Monique? Are flying cars coming to Amsterdam?
I think that's really the very, very last thing we need. Bicycles. That's where I'm at. Oh, and next week we'll talk about bicycles. I think it's time for our next part of our show. And as promised, this week's star guest is superstar writer on technology and media, Douglas Rushkoff. And Douglas is host of the Team Human podcast, author of the book on the same name, and he is here to talk to us about why we all need to be on Team Human in 2020. So roll the credits.
Douglas, thank you so much for joining us. A massive part of your project is Team Human. There's the brilliant Team Human podcast. There's, of course, the Team Human book. And a huge part of what you're saying with that project, of course, is that we are trapped as people in structures all too often, whether it's structures of technology, whether it's markets, that are no longer serving the human project. So, in fact, all too often you have situations where people are being asked to serve technology, or people are being asked to serve markets, rather than markets and technologies serving us. To start, though, I just want to rewind back to a brilliant story you tell in your book, where you're sent to talk to a conference and you end up speaking to a small group of billionaires. And all they want to ask you about is, how do I hang on to my security staff and my staff, basically, when the event comes, when Armageddon comes? Do you think this is the Armageddon they were talking about? Do you think this is the moment it's all starting to fall apart?
Yeah, I mean, this is the moment it all starts to fall apart. It's not necessarily the moment they were talking about, because the moment they're talking about is the moment where everything falls apart, yet they, because of their privilege, are somehow able to insulate themselves from the reality that they're creating by earning money and the way they're doing it. In other words, their fantasy is to be able to build a car that could drive fast enough to escape their own exhaust, or build a technology that's alienating enough to distance them from the legacies of slavery and human suffering and everything they've externalized, all the damage and pain and destruction and environmental costs that they've externalized somehow becomes everyone else's problem, and they can go on. I mean, to their, in all fairness, they're really only, as far as I could tell, they're only dedicating maybe 20% of their resources toward plan B, as it were, the escape plan. And, 70 or 80% are really still committed to somehow this working out. So it's more an insurance plan than it is their main daily active concern. Although I guess after COVID started and they began to experience themselves as over the lip of the strange attractor at the end of time, that we're at the beginning of the first of many cascades, whether it's COVID comes and before COVID's done, Ebola's here, and before Ebola's done, something else is here. Then there's the economic problem, and the race problem, and the gender problem, and the education problem, and then the climate problem, and then the water's going up. So it's like we're running around with masks, trying not to get COVID or Ebola at the same time that we're building dams to keep the water back, at the same time that we're dealing with the nuclear waste that's still pouring in from Fukushima. I mean, there's only so many global epic disasters that we can fend off simultaneously using aggressive Western science and engineering as our only tool.
Yeah, and this has been a great moment, hasn't it, for reminding all of us, even I suspect billionaires, that they're embedded in structures, in social structures, in structures of the natural world that you simply can't escape. And in fact, it's meaningless to talk about escaping from them. We can't just sort of transcend nature. We're part of nature, and the virus is going to affect you no matter how many billions you have.
Exactly. But that's why it's interesting to look at the virus and these other economic problems as wish fulfillment for those who've been looking for excuses to separate from the human organism, from the natural organism. In other words, being on Team Human, being just one of us, as they chanted in the movie Freaks, right? Being just one of us is so horrific. Connecting with other people, being moist and squishy and looking into people's eyes and all that is so alien, to a society that, in Team Human, I trace it back. I mean, you could go all the way back to the Axial Age, to the invention of the first, homes or sedentary living. But I basically go back to Francis Bacon, who was the father of empirical science. And when he described the promise of the scientific revolution and the Renaissance, he said, it will allow us to take nature by the forelock, meaning by the hair, hold her down, and submit her to our will. So what is that? It's a rape fantasy. So science is a rape fantasy that we're somehow going to subdue and control nature. And I think we've finally gotten to the place where we realize, maybe nature's bigger than us. We're part of nature. We can't quite hold her down like that. That the only other creature that talks like that is cancer, right? Cells that grow out of control and ultimately kill their host through their desire for exponential growth.
But it's a bit scary, though, that, I mean, specifically this disease, COVID-19, the corona crisis, that what we need to fight it is being less human. No handshake, no hugs, keeping distance. Even the people that get the disease, they lose taste, they lose smell. It feels like we are being robbed of all our senses, and our, the most thing we want is we just huddle together and hold each other. Keep your distance.
Right. Well, I mean, we've got to look at the crisis. I mean, the way I looked at learning how to put my child to bed. There's as any new parent will know, there's like this time, next time, and the meantime, right? There's this time. It's 2 a.m. My kid won't go to bed. I've got to work. It's everybody screaming, okay, get in the bed with us. It's fine. Just do it. Right. And we know that when we let the child in the bed, it makes it harder. Right. So there's this time in this crisis, we'll let the child sleep in the bed. Then there's the meantime when we're going to do all these other things and try to retrain, reground stuff so that the next time there's a crisis, we don't have to take the child in the bed. So now it's with COVID, right? We live in an antisocial, harsh world with global supply chains and a lack of resilience, high brittleness, with rapid and unsanitary urban industrialization in China, and just all of these effects of rampant runaway growth-based global capitalism. And it's like, okay, so right now we've got to dehumanize in order to not transmit this disease and to cure.
Yeah.
But then in the meantime, we've got to rehumanize more than ever before. We've got to reconnect with each other in ways that reestablish local resilience, local business, local manufacturing, cottage industries, circular economics, acknowledging climate, all the stuff that we can't do right now because we're stuck in this cycle of just disinfecting ourselves. You know, we if we don't do a course correction as soon as we're allowed to come outside, then we're going to become like big agriculture in America, where we have crops and topsoil that are addicted to chemicals that come out of Monsanto. And we've got to reverse that because eventually the chemicals stop working, the stuff will stop growing.
Now, we have an audience of innovators watching, of marketers, of startup founders, you know, business professionals. So I'm super interested in what kinds of things we can tell them, or you, Douglas, can tell them that they should be doing. Like, as Inna said right at the beginning, you know, way back in '98, you and some others advanced a critique of the internet and online culture that was extremely prescient. That wasn't really listened to. You know, we saw the 2010s, you know, we saw massive consolidation, we saw Facebook, we all know that story. There's now a pretty established criticism of that story and the consolidation of the digital space around a few giants. And there's this whole movement for humane technology. You're pretty critical of that movement too, though. So talk to us a bit about what you think is wrong with the mainstream kind of humane technology movement, and what you think innovators now should be building. I mean, you talked a bit about local things like that, but tell us more.
Right. I mean, there's a lot there.
There's a lot there, yeah.
To start, the reason why technology took its wrong turn, the reason why it's working against us rather than for us, is because in the mid-90s, we surrendered digital technology to the needs of the marketplace, right? Where digital technology could have engendered a more circular economy, a more distributed economy where we have lots of, anybody with a laptop can make a business and start sharing and doing things with each other. Wired magazine came along and decided, no, it's more important to figure out ways that digital technology can serve the stock market as it currently exists. So digital technology could be really good for creating short-term exponential growth, for creating a few billionaires. So, you know, founders, because they're just kids, usually they're 19, 20 years old, they're in college, and then a venture capitalist comes to them and looks at their technology the same way that the mob looks at a restaurant. This is a place to do money laundering. This is a place to do financialization. That your app, your platform is a good enough story for me to get hundreds of millions of dollars of investment, get 100x or 1,000x return before the platform dies. Or if the platform gets a monopoly, then maybe something close to forever. So you end up with 3 or 4 players, you know, Facebook and Amazon and Google, and you get no longer, do you have technology serving the economy. So what I would tell those founders is decide up front, are you interested in technology? Are you interested in the thing you do? Do you like the app that you're making? And if you like it, think about what's the difference between running that company and selling that company. Once you sell it to Sequoia or Flatiron or the stock market, it's not your company, right? Your company is a story on debt at that point. Your company is a shill, and they're going to make you pivot and pivot and pivot, which just means taking the app that you were going to do and turning it into some form of exponential surveillance capitalism. And no, your thing's not there anymore. Your Twitter dream, your Facebook dream, all those are gone. And you're now serving a different thing. So you get that reversal. So the way to avoid that is to take as little money as possible at the lowest valuation possible. And I know that sounds bad. It sounds bad, but the idea is the lower your valuation, the less money you take, then the less money you need to pay back. So if you make $50 million, that might be considered good rather than bad. And then think about your own goals and expectations. Can you live with yourself if you only make 10 or 20 million dollars? Can you be okay with that? And you've got to really, and I get it, it hurts, it's painful, it hurts. You're only going to have 10 or 20 million dollars. That's all you're shooting for. You're never going to be Mark Zuckerberg. You're never going to join the 8 Zeros Club or whatever. Can you go? Is that? And if you can somehow do the spiritual work that you need to lower your expectation, and this is real though, to
I
really
think
do that work on
let's-
yourself, to be okay being a multimillionaire, then you're on the path to redemption and toward making positive technology. Now, I love Tristan and the people who are doing the humane technology movement. My concern is that most of the people who come from the humane technology movement are people who were involved in what's called captology, which is the study of how to addict people to technology or how to get people to do other behaviors with technology. That's what that department at Stanford is about. And most of these folks, in their early years, they made all the addictive things. They're the people who ported the algorithms from Las Vegas slot machines into our smartphones, into our social media feeds. And now they feel guilty and terrible about it because they're seeing how they've destroyed so many lives and maybe and led to the election of Trump and Brexit. They did all these things they didn't realize because they weren't reading the Techno-Realism Manifesto and they were just children working for the man. So now they realize, oh my God, this is terrible. So what they want to do is say, well, all this behavioral modification power, we can turn it on its head. And instead of using it to oppress people, we can use it to upgrade people. And that's the language they use. They're going to upgrade humans to this other place. My problem with it is it's still coming from the perspective of how technology acts on people rather than what people can do with technology. So it still feels top down and elitist and controlling to me, that here are some admittedly smarter, nicer white men with a better plan for how to make the world a better place, and they're going to do it to us. So when I hear humane technology, I think about what comes to mind for me are the eggs that I get from cage-free chickens, and they say, you know, humanely raised or humanely raised. I get a package of chicken and it says humanely raised chicken. And I think, oh, so humane technology is going to treat humans more humanely, you know, as we extract their data and make all this money off them. You know, so it's still about how do we preserve this digital economy by doing other things to people rather than just unleashing the people.
If you look, because this is very much a tech show. If you look at, I mean, the whole world's in crisis. It's also a time of innovation and things changing and new patterns. What are the tech examples that make you hopeful? Because I mean, we can talk a lot about what is miserable. I mean, government in some countries is certainly not going to help. So business has to do something. But what makes you hopeful? Where do you see things happening that you think like, well, see, way to go?
The hopeful stuff is the people using the simplest technology to get the job done. You know, what makes me hopeful is seeing people using Google Docs instead of building websites and apps. You know, the most effective medical equipment distribution platform is a Google Doc that was created, and the hospitals list themselves on the left column. It's a sheet, and then the location of the hospital, then what they need, and then where to leave the where to bring the supplies and the instructions of how to do it. And each hospital, each medical center has its own, you know, and meanwhile, you know, that doc is there, that doc is working, and I'm getting emails every day still from people, oh, I have an idea for an app. And you enter in your zip code, whether you have supplies or need supplies, and then you pick from a list of what supplies. And it's like, we don't need an app for that. We've got a spreadsheet is really just fine for that. And and some of the things people are realizing. So there was a very well-meaning movement to make new ventilators using 3D printing. It was great, and we're going to distribute it, and then you make that piece, and he'll make that piece, and he'll make that piece, and it's like we get all the 3D printers that we can going, and it's like, wow, I think we can get 3 of these made every 48 hours. You know, and it's like, how many do we need? Oh, we need 30,000 of them. And it's like, the good thing about it is we realize, oh, there's a role for old industrial technology and new, that these different things are different. And a lot of the externalities of different platforms are being revealed to us. So I feel like we're in a crisis like this, when people just need the right tool to get the job done. We become less romantic in some ways and less futuristic about how we're doing things, and much more practical. We begin to see, what's the bias of this medium? What is it good for? What is it not? Oh, let's not use that. Let's use this. So I see an appropriately utilitarian response coming up.
So the minimal tech, use the least you can use to get the job done.
Somebody's dying. What's gonna work?
Yeah.
That's the original hacker mentality, right? It's, how do we use a piece of technology to solve a human problem now? Not, I got this cool thing. What could I convince people to use it for?
Yeah.
Which is the television era, which is, we've got all these factories and we're going to create media in order to convince people to consume at a rate that will keep the economy growing. Now we understand, oh, like you were saying at the beginning, that is human beings serving the economy, right? The idea, just the fact that we are sending people back to work in the United States, where they're going to risk getting COVID, not because we need the thing that those people are doing, but because we need those people to work at their jobs in order to justify letting them have food and shelter. And that's nuts, right? That's the ass backwardsness that hopefully we're going to be able to unwind.
And do you think there's a chance right now to recapture some of that early promise of sort of a truly more circular economy and platforms that distribute value? I mean, it kind of drives me crazy when, I don't know, not many people do anymore, but when people describe Uber as I don't know, sharing economy, or it's there's no sharing going on there really. Is there now a chance to build platforms that, it strikes me local is one opportunity, and you talked about that sort of distribution of value rather than platforms that suck up all the value into the top of the pyramid is maybe another opportunity right now.
Yeah, I mean, these ideas tend to have kind of two different phases or two different expressions. All these kind of cooperative, circular, local, resilient, distributive economic and interpersonal models. There's those of us who are privileged enough to imagine them and to experiment with them in our little high-tech or high-touch communities in, great Barrington, Massachusetts, or Ithaca, New York. So, and we experiment and play and write books and express these utopian visions for a more cooperative, collaborative, team-based human organism. But where they actually happen is in the inner cities, is the underprivileged. Is because there's so little money and so few resources that people have got to get together and solve their problems themselves. That no welfare state is coming, no cavalry, no assistance, no top-down aid. So what are we going to do? And you see the most advanced cooperative movements are, from the inner cities, from the Black Panthers, from the inner city Philadelphia, the legacies of this work. And a lot of these groups have stayed functioning all this time, with little notice from writers like me who tend to go towards more coastal, erudite expressions of these things. But I mean, in the last couple of books, when I do my research, I see, the people we've been ignoring most of the time are the ones who are the most advanced at these models of social and economic exchange. And we've got to start taking lessons from them. And stop thinking that we've got the one size fits all industrial age idea or band-aid for everybody, that we've got the app or technology or code that if we could only scale it, then everyone will be okay. It's no, it turns out scale is not the solution. Scale is the problem, and that locally, local and highly diverse solutions for diverse situations are what's going to create the greatest cultural sustainability and resilience.
Okay, I really, really want to hear from the audience, because I'm sure we have some audience questions. Before we do that, though, just want to launch an audience poll. I want to ask the audience something. I think the question we've got is pretty broad. It's a pretty agricultural question about the impact of technology on this moment. So I just want to launch a poll that asks people whether they think technology in this moment is having a beneficial effect or not. So go to the chat, you'll see the poll. Basically, you can vote for either technology is what's going to save us or technology is going to be our doom. And we will see the results at the end of the show. So technology is our savior right now. Technology is going to lead to our doom right now. Which do you believe? You may be a more nuanced person who thinks it's somewhere between the two, but you're not allowed to say that. Okay, we're talking black and white now. Savior or doom? That's what you need to vote. But do we have any questions?
Healthy.
I'm wondering from the audience that we can ask. Aha, we do. Let me see here. So we've got a question from Jacob, and Jacob says, based on my opinion that we have a deep leadership crisis, who do you think is capable of challenging the systemic problems in the United States or in the world for real? Do you have any role models?
Alicia Garza. She's one of the founders of Black Lives Matter in the States. Honestly, I mean, in the US, Black women, I mean, and I hate to sound racially determinist about it, but I've been personally most inspired by the Black female leaders that I've seen, because they've got kind of a, double or triple layer of oppression. And it's not just that they deserve a turn, but they understand the problem experientially in ways that I can't. And the fact that so many of them have emerged as loving, inclusive, open people that are tolerant of my ignorance and the slow baby steps that it takes me to fully. I'm just, every day I'm like 3 more. Oh, now I get it. Oh, no, now I get it. And that they don't just want to slap me, or if they do want to slap me, that they haven't. But yeah, they're around, that those are the kinds. I mean, she's a great model of sort of what I'm looking for in a leader. And I've done a few panels and things with her, and I've posed her some of the kind of stupid questions that I know are stupid even, and I'll see the way her body takes it in, and she'll hear the stupid thing and she'll breathe. She'll take a breath, then she'll smile, she'll look in my eyes, and then she'll start talking. And I'm like, oh, wow. Even just modeling, if I could just model that, I would be so much better off just through basic mimesis. So they're around, but they're leaders that don't understand leadership the way that we're even phrasing leadership. They understand leadership as a community embrace, as channeling something, as helping maybe refine a community urge or a larger emotion. It's a whole other capability. So yeah, they're around. So she's one. She's a good enough name that I almost just want to give one.
We have thank you so much. We have a question from David. It's a pretty high level question, this one. How do you balance the tension between the pragmatic and the idealistic? I mean, I guess we could refine it by saying, is now a time for pragmatism or idealism? A lot of the stuff you were talking about before, different local solutions depending on different local contexts, and we have to get rid of this idea of like one big solution that we kind of mastermind and impose. It sounds like pragmatism is a big part of your of what you prescribe right now. Is that fair?
Yeah. The high level way of answering that question is that we are, as a civilization, or certainly Western civilization, we are migrating from a television media environment to a digital media environment. The television media environment was global. It was watching the felling of the Berlin Wall together in real time, watching the moon landing. Even just the Ronald Reagan saying, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall," was this unifying global event. Television is for ideology. It was a great ideological medium because it's about fantasy and constructing a picture and narratives and storytelling. Digital, when we try to do ideology in digital, you get the Twitter wars, you get insanity, you get the Facebook silos. Ideology is the industrial age television era approach to problem solving, where digital feels to me is much more hands-on maker. I mean, these are the digits, right? So it's a much more participatory, practical, localized, distributed approach to the world. Digital, it looks global, but it actually expresses something very local because every laptop is a broadcast center. We're not just receiving centralized media in a distributed way. We are a distributed content creation. So yeah, I do think it becomes much more practical and in some ways historically based because digital is so much about memory. Everything that happens on digital is in memory. So we can access histories and memory that we couldn't access before, which again connotes more of a hands-on practical approach to things. So yeah, I would say that the question that the television asks us is, what do you believe? And the question that digital asks us is, what can you do? And so yeah, it's practical.
Monique, are you seeing anything interesting in the audience?
Many interesting questions, but I would also like to put one forward is because we only have time for one or two more, I think. It's about this period is probably never ending, right? I mean, this is just a new reality that we're in. But what industries do you think will change the most? And I know you had some thoughts about education as well, because, in this digital, what you can do atmosphere, education will change as well. Education was also a bit like television, broadcasting ideas and, getting into the minds of people. What do you think? What will change?
Well, in some ways, we're going to realize what the value of face-to-face live contact and encounters was. The Zoom is great for education of facts, great for transmitting data and the knowledge sets. And we're realizing, though, that what's missing is mimesis, meaning the live encounter with the person. The reason you're in a classroom with a teacher is not to get information from that teacher, but to experience another human being in the process of learning and discovery. It's for kids to see, what does a body look like when it is learning, when it is putting information together, when it is making sense, and then you imitate that process in the room. It's not just what numbers are on the blackboard, it's what's happening. So in Zoom, we can do the numbers on the blackboard, but it's really hard to get that sense of live imitation of another organism. And we also begin to realize that, all of these subjects we're teaching kids in school, they're the excuse. They're not the reason they're there. It's the excuse that they're there, partly because we need daycare, but really so that they can be in this social setting with a model human being who's initiating them into a culture of learning. That's what education was. Back to those great reversals you were talking about. How we serve the economy and we serve technology. Education was invented, public education was compensation for a life of work. It was so that the coal miner would be able to come home after a long day of work, read a book, and experience that basic human dignity of having an intelligence and an opinion, to post-enlightenment understanding of the human. Now we look at education as preparation for the job, preparation for work. That's not what it's for. It was relief from work, not preparation for work. But we've got principals and presidents of universities going to the CEOs of company to find out, what do you want the workers to be able to do, so that the corporation can externalize job training to the public sector, rather than letting kids have this time to grow into thinking, thoughtful human beings.
Yeah, here to that. If there's one phenomenon I find more depressing than any other, it's the idea that higher education is now intended to prepare you for a job, and all these young people that come to me and say, yeah, like I love trends. I love I want to study trends at university, and I'm like, please don't study trends at university.
I know. I've had students. I've gotten in trouble for this. I've gotten in trouble for this, but when I've been at these talks or seminars that we do to try to get students to come to CUNY, to City University of New York, and when people ask me what jobs will I be better equipped for after I've taken your classes, and I say, well, actually, I think you're going to in some ways be less equipped for any of them. After taking, you're going to start questioning the value of all of them if you're actually educated.
Yeah, right. Okay, look, thank you so much. We need to be conscious of time. And before we let you go, there is one extra thing you need to do.
Right.
And that is travel to another planet and make some decisions about how you want that planet to be. It is time for our regular Next World interview segment. So let's roll the credits for that.
Imagine this. It is the near future, amid an increasingly acute crisis on planet Earth. Not sure what you're talking about. A crack team of technologists finalizes a daring plan to start a new chapter of humanity. Along with 1,000 specially selected people, they will travel far beyond the solar system to the planet Next One. They will establish a permanent base, a new society, a new home for human beings. Douglas Rushkoff, thanks to your outstanding achievements in the fields of studying humans in the digital age, you have been chosen to be among the first 1,000 pioneers to travel to Next One. But before you undertake your journey, you must answer 5 questions. Let's see question 1. Name one luxury physical object you want to take to your new home.
I hope these don't get me kicked out. I'm thinking I would like a complete mushroom spore kit.
All right.
Of all kinds of mushrooms, because I feel like the sacred plant medicines of Earth shouldn't be left behind, and I don't know if they're going to have mushrooms on the new planet. So yeah, I want to bring a kit with like a variety of different teaching plants.
All right, I'll be interesting to taste your mushroom soup there. So, name one exceptional person who should qualify to be among the first 1,000 pioneers.
If I had to pick one person, honestly, I think we should select at least one person randomly, probably more, because I've been thinking about the citizen council concept of that Extinction Rebellion is putting forth. And the idea that rather than electing them, you pick them randomly to avoid sort of the existing biases that we have. And I feel like unless we pick a couple of people randomly, we're going to end up without crucial things. We're going to have just some rich white dudes selecting who comes based on some great system they came up with, but those systems always leave something out. So I want a random person generator to pick my person.
I love the idea. Create one law that bans something from Next One forever.
If I got to go to one law, I'll go to Hillel, who when he was asked to describe the whole of Judaism, in standing on one leg, and he said, don't do anything to someone else that you wouldn't want done to yourself. It's kind of the opposite of do unto others. It's more than negative. Refrain from doing something to someone else that you wouldn't do to yourself. And that would sort of be my single starting point. I mean, these are tricky.
I know. But we want to only take the best to our new planet. So
okay.
Explain one truth about human nature or one ethical principle to live by that you have to learn from, that you have learned from experience?
Well, I mean, I would say that what we have to learn is that in some ways is the folly of this thought experiment. In some ways, that you can never escape history. You know, you can't, there's no discontinuity, that where we're coming from, the stuff we've done, karma is real. You know, that in the West, we really like to believe that there's some way to start over, that we'll come to America, we'll go to California, we'll start, I mean, these guys want to start artificial islands in the middle of the ocean, and then it'll be perfect. That it doesn't, that it doesn't work, that we're part of a larger system, and we can't spawn like that. Your children are connected to you. Your experiences are in their DNA. There is no final escape. And I guess that's the truth about human nature, that you can't do anything new under the sun, that all we do is recycle the ideas of the past, the ideas of the gods, you know, that you're part of a continuity.
Which is also soothing, I think. Last week's pioneer was the futurist Sahel Inayatullah, and he said that your first book on the internet was rejected because the publishers thought the internet would not be around for another year. Not sure if that's true, but anyway, he wanted to know from you, Douglas, what is the next forecasting error?
I think the big forecasting error people are making now is that the financial markets will function intact for another decade. You know, I think that there's what we're witnessing is in some way is the end of capitalism as the dominant economic system, and the realization that the real economy has been serving this artificial banking financialization economy for way too long and with too negative effect. And so many people are still betting so many trillions of dollars on the continuance of that thing, and it's detached itself. It's detached itself from reality and can be, doesn't matter how much money you have, it's how much skills and real resources you have.
A lot of truth in there. Last question for you. Identify a question to ask our next week's pioneer, who will be British product designer Ben Sauer, who's postulating that we have to slow down to speed up. What's your question for him?
Well, I mean, as long as we're slowing down in our development process, what I'm interested to know is how specifically can we incorporate social justice, and specifically racial justice, into the design process. You know, I'm almost more interested in how we integrate it into the design process more than how do we integrate it into our designs. So when we're teaching design to young people, how do we fold in the social justice consciousness into that process? Where does it come in?
Thank you so much.
Douglas. That was fascinating. I love the idea of a random person generator for next one. I think you're right. We don't want just 1,000 people with, you know, massive egos and all their books and everything. Not present company accepted, obviously. But we don't just want 1,000 writers and keynote speakers to be the next one.
Can you imagine a planet of TED
exactly.
speakers? I don't even want to go.
Even the journey there would be like murderous. Yeah, exactly. We have to wrap up super quickly, but before we do, let's find out what the audience said. Is technology our savior right now, or is it our doom? Inna, what did they say?
It's a little bit like business as usual. The audience is more or less 50-50. So 46% think tech will save us, and the rest of them tech will doom us.
Okay, well, I'm glad we found another way to polarize people in our own small way on this show. But I think that's all we have time for, right, Monique?
Absolutely. We hope to see you again next week. And, thank you so much, Douglas. And Ina, up to you to read us out.
Thank you so much for watching the show today. And thank you, Douglas, for all your super interesting remarks. Next week, we will be back with a very interesting guest from the UK, Ben Sauer. He is a product designer and design strategist, or as he calls himself, an opportunity detective. He loves to find ways in which digital products can better meet the needs of people. So next week, we will talk to him about how to design change. This show is made possible by our hosting partners Accenture Interactive and Factor 3, and with support of the video platform 23. Thanks to everyone involved in planning, organizing, and producing the show, especially to the next team and my fellow hosts, and of course to our great speakers, and to you, our audience. See you next week.